Hello and welcome to another Cotton Incorporated podcast. My name is John Devine, Senior Economist. This podcast is the first in a series that discusses Chinese cotton policy and its relationship to cotton price direction around the world. The purpose of this segment is to provide an overview of China's dominant role in the global cotton market and to underline how the changes brought about by China's policy of maintaining high domestic prices have impacted the Chinese supply and demand situation. Since China is so important to the global cotton market, these changes to the Chinese cotton situation have had major implications for cotton prices everywhere. We can begin to understand China's importance to the world market by taking a look at data that show how China dominates virtually every statistical category regarding global supply and demand. The figures I will share with you are averages over the last 3 crop years, which is the time period when Chinese policies that maintained high domestic prices were in place. Starting with production, China has been the world's largest grower for more than 4 decades. China's share of the global harvest has declined somewhat in recent years, but China still grows more cotton than any other country and has been producing about 30% of the global harvest since 2011-2012. The world's second largest grower, India, produces about 24% of the total. The third largest grower, the U.S., produces about 13%. When we take a look at mill use, or the amount of raw cotton fiber spun into yarn, we see that China is even more dominant, consuming about 35% of the world's total. Even though China grows more cotton than any other country, it still does not produce enough to fully supply its mills. As a result, China is also the world's largest cotton importer. Over the last 3 crop years, China represented more than 40% of the world's total import demand. While policies supporting high domestic prices were in effect, the world's cotton supply became increasingly concentrated in China. Over the last 3 crop years, China has held an average of more than 50% of the world's warehouse supplies. At the end of the 2013-2014 crop year, China is expected to possess nearly 60% of global stocks. The concentration of global supply in China can be seen as a consequence of Chinese policy. If we compare Chinese ending stocks in the 3-year period before the guaranteed price policies went into effect, relative to the 3 years after, we see Chinese ending stocks tripled. The reason why stocks accumulated so steeply had to do with how prices were guaranteed under recent policy. When the government bought cotton at guaranteed levels, it flowed into the reserve system, a government warehousing program. While the government conducted sales of its warehouse supplies, much of the cotton it purchased has been withheld from the market, and this quickly resulted in record levels of stocks. Less direct effects of Chinese policy occurred in other statistical categories. An example is imports. Since so much of the Chinese crop flowed into government warehouses over the past few years, it was not available to mills. As a result, Chinese mills were supplied with higher levels of imported cotton. Over the last 3 crop years, Chinese imports averaged levels that were nearly double those before policies guaranteeing higher prices were put into effect. This impacted the world cotton market since China absorbed higher levels of exports from cotton shipping countries. Another statistical category where Chinese policy has had an impact is mill use. While China allowed higher levels of cotton to be brought into the country, the volume of imports is controlled by the government and was limited. With domestic prices higher than world prices, Chinese mills faced stiff competition on the global yarn market and consumption decreased. Over the last 3 crop years, Chinese consumption of cotton fiber fell over 20%. One statistical category where there has not been significant change under the system guaranteeing higher prices is production. The stated goal of the policies when they were introduced was to stabilize Chinese acreage. In that respect, the policies appear successful. However, Chinese government officials have hinted that they will change the way they support cotton farmers in the future. Indications suggest these reforms could reduce Chinese cotton acreage. Correspondingly, one of the most important changes in Chinese cotton statistics in the next 3 years may come from production. That brings us to the end of this podcast. The purpose of this episode was to provide an introduction, to provide an overview of China's dominant role in the cotton market, and to underline how the changes brought about by China's policy of maintaining high domestic prices have impacted China's supply and demand situation. In other podcasts in this series, we will discuss how China has used policy tools to influence their domestic market and how this has affected cotton prices around the world. If you are interested in more information, you're encouraged to listen to the other podcasts in this series. In addition, you can email me at the address shown here. Thank you for your interest.